Tammy, would you introduce our speaker for us?
Thank you, Jay. My name's Tammy. I'm an addict.
Hi,
Hi,
Tammy.
Tammy.
Thank you, Helen, for asking me to introduce our speaker this evening. I feel like it's a great privilege and an honor to do so. I feel very blessed to know this lady. This lady is a guiding force and a guiding light for many in the fellowship, including myself. This lady has and walks with such grace, dignity, has such a caring, loving heart, and has given so much back to the fellowship in so many ways that, especially in service, that I can only hope to emulate a little bit of the path that this lady has walked and continues to walk and continues to pave that path for many. So, with my great privilege, I introduce this evening's speaker, Penelope. Over to you, Penelope.
I'm very pleased that I was asked to do the show, and my name's Penny, and I am an addict.
Hi, Penelope.
I am, a lot of people know me as Penny. Depends how long you've known me. I've been
Hello, Penelope. Hello, Penny.
Penelope.
Hi, Penny.
A lot of people know me as Penelope, but a lot of people know me as addict. I'm glad that I'm here. Glad that I eventually found this program, and it is a way of life. Hope it doesn't freak anybody out that maybe anybody that sort of has doubts about why they're here, or may have just found this program and be in denial. Somebody's piggybacking into the meeting on members' numbers, and there's a lot of abuse in the chat. And I must admit that when I was using it, I got quite immune to that sort of behavior. That's how people talk to each other out in the madness. And I didn't end. I ended up in that madness, but I didn't know in the beginning when I first picked up drugs. I was like, I'll tell you a little bit about me. But what happened last night? I went out for dinner and went to see play at the Barbican, and it was in Spanish. It was Hamlet in Spanish. And so I'm aware that I did know before, and I have a friend that we go to see productions, and it's good for me to be able to keep going out. But we were talking, and it's like he was talking about gambling, and for me, I grew up around race courses and races and dog tracks and things, and my my dad was a gambler, my mom was a gambler, and I grew up in that kind of soup of codependency around money and the fear. And one of the things that has happened to me since I've been practicing this program is I've learned to trust a higher power, a God of my understanding, who, somehow I've learned to lean on that. Any codependency I have is with my higher power. And we were talking about fear and not being loved, and how difficult it is for addicts to be loved, because we all have this. I don't know what I've heard shared over the years. Is that addicts really struggle with opening up to another human being, and in intimacy, we flee from it. I had to do quite a lot of work around that. I suffered a lot of shame in the fellowship because I could not understand. I just couldn't get it, you know, and understand that bit. And it was where addiction went, because if you've been clean a while, you start to understand that addiction is a progressive, incurable, and fatal illness, and it progresses when we're clean, which is something that I got surprised about. But I need a progressive recovery. You know, living this program has taught me that I do need to not allow the disease in any shape or form to come into my life. And you know, it's like, I don't, you know, if it's got that color about it, I put it into, yeah, well, I'm not, you're not coming in, you know, because I can't afford. And some people think I'm strict about that stuff, and that's what I practice for myself, and that's the message I carry. That, you know, it's just to be vigilant in the understanding that this disease doesn't go away, and it gets subtle, and you know, it comes in all sorts of forms. You know, relationships, shopping, money. These have all been, you know, real areas that I've had to do some work around. Money has been huge because, you know, my dad, he you know, I know that people who are, you know about tech stuff and work in that all the time might not know or remember, but we used to have a thing called cash, and my dad would come home from the races with a lot of cash, like hundreds, thousands, and it'd be all on the table, and you know, it's like, so, you know, when I was around drug dealers, I didn't have a problem with all that, you know, it's like a lot of cash, a lot of drugs on the table, and, you know, the drugs got worse. I've started off sex and drugs and rock and roll, you know, relationships and the culture of music, and in the 60s, and the kind of drugs we were all using, you know, they were writing about them, and we just lived it, you know. And obviously over the years, the drugs have got, I don't know, the drugs got harder for me. You know, a certain drug has stopped working, and I wouldn't get as high as I used to, and then I switched to another drug, and then, you know, it went on like that, and I ended up in a caravan, you know, through all the life stuff that happens, ending marriages, and, you know, no money, you know, messing up careers, and all the things, the promise of my life, that, you know, I had so many opportunities. And yeah, so I ended up with my 2 children who were really crazy with this disease, and living with an addict who was a lot younger than me, had, you know, access to the drugs, because I had to stay at home with the kids most of the time. I did have a sense of right and wrong. It was a bit warped. All my kind of thinking was warped through the drugs I took, but there was a core of me that had you know, a responsibility to my children still, and I would do anything to keep them from being taken from me. Social services were involved in a lot of stuff, and but I managed to evade them. I was quite very dishonest in my dealings with them, because I was terrified. There were a lot of people who wanted to harm my children, harm me, and yeah, so, you know, that ending up in this caravan, you know, you'd never, I mean, if I tell you, we've got online meetings. There's hundreds of them online, and there are hundreds of them everywhere. And we used to, when I first got clean, there were people around that would tell you, this is a global fellowship. You know, you know, when we're saying the Serenity Prayer, we're holding hands with all the other meetings in the world that are saying the Serenity Prayer at the same time, and I loved that idea. I loved the idea that this program expresses love, and it's the unconditional love, and the hippie in me. The hippie in me, I found this, the hippiedom of my dreams, and nobody's using drugs because, we were all hippies until we didn't have any drugs, and then the table got tipped up, and somebody had hit somebody, or, flower pots went flying out of windows, and, it was like really quite, my using got quite dark at one point, and yeah, so I mean, it was a miracle that I was found in this caravan, because in the whole of this county, which stretches along the east coast, all the way down from Scotland down to southern England, Essex, where I was, and there was 3 meetings, I think 3 meetings a week. One was in Southend, and my caravan was quite close to that. But they were all crazy. That's bumper sticker, clean and crazy. They some of them would turn up and go, well, I haven't had a drink, because they go to AA, and but they were drinking, and they come to NA and say they were clean, go to AA and say they were sober if they hadn't had a drink, but they were using other drugs. So the message was there because they had literature, which is something that I've always looked for in meetings, when you go to face-to-face meetings, that if there is literature on the table, it is part of a power greater than me, the power of words that tell me about the disease that I suffer with, but they also tell me what I can do about it. And, my understanding of the spiritual principles, I mean, I was a people pleaser, right? So they suggested I get a sponsor, and I was in this meeting, and they kept jabbing me in the ribs because there was a girl there who, she was a girl, and I was quite old when I got to NA, and I thought, it's like, but she had nice boots on, and that was where I was at. I had a pair of trainers on that I hadn't taken off for about, I don't know, at least 5 years, and the jeans the same. Where we lived, it was pretty crazy, and the way we lived. And so I asked her, and it was like she was a token, and but then she gave me a number and told me to call her, and we didn't have a phone anymore. We didn't have mobiles in those days. The only phone that I had access to was the one in the middle of the village, and was kind of, I used to go and phone her, and I thought, oh, this is happening. Oh dear. And she would say, well, that it's all right. Don't worry. Go to a meeting. Do and then she'd make suggestions, and I think, what the hell does she know about my life? I've been married twice. I've been around the world. I've been famous and infamous. I've done this and done that, and what does she know about it? She's only in her 20s. I tell you what, she knew how to work the steps. She was cleaner than me. She had 4 years at the time, which nowadays doesn't seem like a lot, but actually it made a difference. And the group of people that were around then were you know, they did practice a program and they were clean and they were improving their lives. And, you know, I mean, sometimes I'd think, oh, you've all got eating disorders, you're all too fat. Because I was like 6 stone 10 or something. I don't know if you know what that is. I was wasted. And, you know, I didn't eat much. So anyway, you know, I'd phone my sponsor again and I'd say, oh, and she said, did you do what I suggested? And I said, oh no, I didn't do that. And she said, well, how do you expect anything to change? And I was like, what? So then I wouldn't phone her. And then I'd still end up in the same mess. And it's the story about sponsorship with newcomers. And I don't know if any of you relate to that. But you know, one day I was in, I went to the phone box and my sponsor wasn't there, and her husband was there, and he was in recovery as well. He was one of the group of people that we all used to go to meetings together. And he said, what? And I told him about what was happening. Oh, there's a drug dealer due any minute, and he's you know, come with a machete, and you know, and the boyfriend's there, and he's, you know, if he comes back and there's no food and there's no money, there's nothing I can do, and the kids are due back any minute, and there's no dinner, and it's all my fault, and you know. And he's, you know, at the end of all this diatribe, he said to me, look, when you put the phone down, pray. And I was like, what do you mean, pray? What good's that going to do? I'm going to get killed any minute. So anyway, what I did. And he said, well, when you've done that, go and find somewhere quiet to sit and meditate. I was like, what? I mean, these days I meditate every day, you know, and it's like, well, those days it was like I only meditated if I was stoned. You know, that was my understanding then. And anyway, so I did that. I put the phone down and I think I said something like, if you're there, God, do something, show me. And I swear that you know, anybody who knows about Doctor Who and the police box, it was like that. And it was like I went to a different dimension because I felt different. I don't know what happened. I must have surrendered. And so I went out and I sat down by the mill, this village where we were. There was a mill, and the sun was shining like dappled sunbeams on the water as it was moving. And I just sat and watched it, and I kind of went somewhere. Anyway, well, I thought, I pulled myself together. I thought, I better go and see what's happening back in the ranch. I got there and there was nobody there. The kids had gone. I found out later they'd gone to their friend's house. And no drug dealers, no anybody. There was a mess. So obviously something had happened, but you know, it didn't involve me. And I found that in my early recovery, when I shared what was happening in my life, it went away. Somehow it went away. I mean, you know, got chased by cows one day in the field, and I shared about it, and this guy said bullocks. He said they're bullocks, not cows. They're bullocks. I was like, oh, no wonder. I was a bit scared. I was running away from them. I found out what is the difference between, you know, fear and you know, genuine concern. Like, you know, and they said when you're crossing the road, you look both ways because your fear motivates you to make sure you don't get run over. But you know, that fear that I used to feel when I opened my eyes in the morning and I felt like I was falling out the side of a building. That kind of adrenaline of, oh, this, you know, that bastard, he did this, and how am I going to pay the rent next week? You know, I was never in the moment reading something in the basic text. by the time I got to the full stop, I couldn't remember what the first word was. And, you know, somehow they told me, no matter what, do not pick up the first one. So, like, I had that tattooed on inside my eyelids, and it's still there. I do not pick up, you know, it. And like I said, if it's tinged with the disease, you know, and I've got a bit of doubt, then it's like, you know, I stay on the right side. The vigilance is there, because it says in the basic text, vigilance is the price of freedom. And I had a sponsor later on in the program. I had another sponsor, and she was quite tough, and she told me everything has a price. And I discovered that with, you know, taking risks in relationships. I never saw them as being part of addiction. Although I knew in the back of my mind, you know, they're you know, using relationships, or, you know, can be toxic. You know, we know so much more these days about how and what's written about it. You know, we've got new literature. We were lucky to be able to get your hands on a basic text in those days. We had a little white book, and you know, basic things. And I went to this meeting in Chelsea, and you know, I got a travel card when I got my gyro. We used to get gyro. And this woman, she had 8 years, and she wrote in my book, she wrote in this basic text, and she said, keep coming back, it will work. And I was, you know, those little things, like spiritual awakenings almost, you know, they kept me coming back. And I, you know, and building the faith that I have, because I hope I don't upset anybody who has a religious God in their life. But for me, I had to give up religion to get the program, because the religions that I'd looked for the solution in were all like, had lots of rules, and you can't do this and you can't, and it was almost like you can't wear this color, you've got to wear that color, you know. And I'd go to church, for example, and they were all too bright and shiny for me. You know, and I used to go to the Rasta church, and the Rastas were like, you have to smoke a pound of dope again, you know, grass. And I thought that was spiritual as well, you know. And you know, the Buddhists, I got freaked out by the fact they said that, you know, none of this is real, it's all an illusion. There's little messages I got from them I didn't trust, from religions, you know. These days it's different. I will take good stuff from any source, and you know, I have as part of my step 3, I really did a lot of research into what, you know, the universe. What is it? You know, why are we the only evolved civilization? You know, and we don't live very long. And how, you know, why? You know, and that stuff is. But the relationship that I have with God, the God of my understanding, is, you know, I can touch it. When I'm sitting here, it's like it's close, it's there, and I, you know, I ask for help in the moment, and trying to live, you know, this thing that we understand, the spiritual principles that build the program. You know, for me, learning to be honest, and having some kind of clue about what the disease looks like was what was in my step 1, my first step 1. We didn't have the working guide then. We did it through kind of sharing, really. And the understanding that you have to be clean for it to work. And I had to get over all my reservations and, you know, what that was about. And it's almost like they were in my face before I knew it. You know, but I did start to get better, and and everybody said to me, "Get those kids out of that cardboard box." They deserve a life, and you're not giving them the best. And I was like, I like living in a caravan. I like being close to the earth and feeling it when you wake up in the morning. Sometimes it was like the mist would come through the floorboards, and it was really cold, and the dog would go whimpering around looking for somewhere to jump up. Yeah. Suffer the consequences of that. I have really bad arthritis, chronic arthritis, which, I mean, I have had the most awful time in the last 5 years. I had 1, 2, 3, 4 operations. I had one on my shoulder that was really freaked me out, because for months I couldn't do anything. I had to wear a sling. It was very difficult to negotiate places. And it's like challenges in recovery, no matter what, do not pick up the first one. Yeah, no matter what. Are you prepared to go to any lengths? Oh, well, I've proved that I am, as far as I can, up to this moment. And I had woke up one morning recently, and my left eye, I couldn't see anything. It was black, it was like I thought, oh, rubbed it a bit and thought, well, this is all right, I'll see what it's like tomorrow. I mean, then I didn't do anything, and that's living in denial. I know that now. And subsequently, I went to quite a lot of A&Es and waited 4 and 5 hours, and then another 4 and 5 hours, and only to be told at 11 o'clock at night that I was going to lose the sight in that eye if I didn't have an operation, and to come back sort of the day after tomorrow and be prepared to have an operation. And actually, it worked out that I had the operation on the Saturday, and they reattached the retina, and you do it, without a general anaesthetic, which I found really interesting, because looking through the eye they're operating on, and the surgeon, I'm on first names terms with her. She's like that. She's quite progressive, modern young woman, and very talented, and knows what she's doing. She has music on in the theatre, and operating theatre, and she sings the music while she's operating, but at the same time my eyeballs on this big screen that she's teaching as well, and every now and then she'll say so. So I knew exactly what she was doing. It was really, really interesting the first time it happened. Last time I had a more complex operation, and by the end I was really like, I've been brave up to now, and I'm breathing, and I am meditating, but I can't do this any longer. It's like an hour and 20 minutes, and the last 10 minutes were really difficult. And she knew. She said to me, "Hold on, not much left," because they had to repair a lot of stuff with lasers. There were drills going. You can hear the soft noise of the drill, and you can hear the noise of the laser. And I didn't let my imagination run riot. I just stayed with my higher power. And I thought, if I can do natural childbirth, I can do this. Anyway, I haven't touched on the thing with my children. This has been one of the most wonderful things about recovery is the relationship I have with my children today. And my son was there. I had to recuperate from that operation, the first one and the second one, laying on my right side for 24 hours a day. I think I was allowed 5 minutes every half an hour to stretch or have something to eat. comfort breaks and things like that. But it was quite a discipline to do that. And thank God for K-dramas, my latest obsession. Yeah, and but I love recovery because my relationships with my children have become so deep and meaningful. My son has he had his own problems with addiction, and discovered the program. You know, he knew that it was there, and you can't force people to get clean and have this wonderful life. You know, but I carried the message because I was living it, and he somehow through God and the fellowship, he got clean, and he started going to meetings, and has now he has all the promises of a wonderful life, which I know we're not supposed to have, but you know that the fact is, if you stay clean and you know and you do certain actions that are suggested by stuff you discover in your step work, you know, you know, you can make changes in your life, you know, because that's what they told me. You have to change your personality when you come here. And it was like, oh, what? I don't want to, no, I'm this, I'm that, you know. But in actual fact, I have changed a lot, you know. Somebody said to me the other day, because I was sharing about smoking cigarettes, and she was trying to stop, and I was sharing with her about it, and you know, if my eyes were open, I had a cigarette in my mouth, you know, it's like no matter what time of day it was, and through being clean for a while, I stopped. I wanted to stop early on, but my sponsor said to me, "You'll stop when you're ready," and it is something that happened to me. I surrendered and used the program around nicotine, and she said to me, I can't imagine my sponsor. She said, smoking? What? Yeah. And I think people can't imagine what I was like when I was using, you know, it was totally nuts. And, you know, I mean, there are times when I think about days when I was so desperate to find a skinny guy somewhere. Sorry if you're a skinny guy, but a skinny guy somewhere that owed me a tenner so that I could find another skinny guy to score a bag of gear off and you know, feel all right for 10 minutes. And it's not like that for me anymore, you know. Addiction's become one of those things where I recognize obsession. I recognize that like excitement of, oh, you know, this will fix it. This feels wonderful, you know, that addiction. But there are things that give me joy, and being able to differentiate between them comes in, you know, through working the program. You start to find out what that is, what the nature of addiction is, because it can lead you down some weird alleyways. I don't know how long I've been sharing for. I'm not sure how long I'm supposed to share for. Anyway, I'll carry on until Jay stops me. Yeah, the relationship, of course, with the higher power is something that you have to live through things that challenge your, you know, faith, the fear that comes up. I heard a guy called Pepe. I had a tape when I was in the caravan. We used to have little tapes. And it was a bootleg tape somebody had got. excuse me, a recording of his share, and he used to talk about there's two forces in the universe, and one is fear, and the other one is love. And it's like, decide where you want to be. And this is like step 11 stuff. It's like, God's will's easy. My will hurts. My will, I get into trouble, and that's what the 10th step's about. It stops me from making the same mistake over and over. I recognize my addiction, and that, like, the evil force comes in, and it's very subtle. Can get me into trouble. I've got in trouble with credit cards, all sorts, things people, relationship. People jump off buildings and stuff, because they can't bear it. My dad died on my 5th NA birthday, and he wanted me there. I was clean. It's quite a privilege to be with someone when they pass. I was with my mother, but technically I wasn't in recovery, but I had to learn how to grieve her, because the things that kill that emotional pain are the things that let you down in the end, the drugs. And through the fellowship, I got into university. I went to university clean, and I adored it. I loved it. I loved learning. I had an appetite for learning I never had when I was at school. I used to hate it at school. But what happened was something else. The change in me opened my mind to be able to accept constructive criticism from a tutor that I didn't think much of, and read lines through all my essays, because I didn't have kind of a lot of skill of writing essays. I had to learn how to do a lot of stuff, and I had those moments, looking out the window of the college that I was, the building, the college building was Catholic, actually. And they were teaching us things that they used to burn women for 500 years ago. It really made me laugh. And I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed it. And I had this moment of looking out at the blue sky and these white fluffy clouds and the cumulus nimbus shape, that just floated across the sky. And I had a moment of thinking, how did I get here? I was a failed suicide in the caravan. My using took me to that place. I didn't go on about the attempts that I'd made. But, I was talking to my son about it the other day, and my daughter too. Part of the amends process has been about, talking stuff through, all the hurts and all the times when I've done stuff that wasn't me, really. It was motivated by the drugs and, and the behaviors. I mean, I laugh about it now, but I was pretty crazy. And people in the fellowship was like, get away from that sick bitch. She's not, no, they didn't say that really. But, it was like, I felt like that. I mean, I couldn't see through the distortions of my understanding. I couldn't see the truth. you know, one of the things I found that, you know, I have assets, but when I'm in my defect, my you know, my they're like clouds that come across the sun of my recovery. You know, the sun is the sunlight of the purity. You know, I was talking to someone the other day who does healing, and you know, it's like, you know, not being pure. It's like the healing comes through you. I know this is an outside issue, but it's been part of my journey. The healing comes through you, but if you're blocked anywhere, it can be quite difficult to, you know, to be that vessel to help. And that's why the program is so good, you know, because it's because we've been sick and we have understanding of what the disease does to us and how we've got out of it. You know, that's that story about the guy that falls in the hole, and all these people keep walking past and he keeps saying, "Get me out, get me out," and everybody, you know, people can't. They try and pull him out, and he can't get out. And this little guy comes along and he jumps in the hole. And the guy says to him, "Look, now we're both stuck." And he goes, "Yeah, but I've been in this hole before and I know the way out." They both climb out. I always love that story, you know. Yeah, thank you for letting me share. I'm not going to ramble on anymore. I think it's been quite a long time, and hope you will have a chance to share back to me. Yeah. And please don't do what the guy in the chat box suggests. Anyway, thank you, Jay, for letting me share, and thank you all for being here and listening to me.